You may go on vacation for a week and just leave church behind. Well, you're overloading on family, but you need that too. So when you overload on church, you look ahead and plan and communicate and be intentional. We're going to do this so that everybody knows, okay, our family's okay, crazy right now, but we're going to go do this. Or, hey, my dad said we're going to go, blah, blah, blah. Just something to focus them back on that family's important. It's crazy right now, but we'll catch up.
Hi there. Welcome back to the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Franklin, and this is a show where we help you learn and master the skills that you need to grow your leadership effectiveness and enjoyment. And if you don't want to miss an episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell on YouTube or the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform to get notified as soon as I post a new session. And before we get started, I do want to mention that I have a great product called the Christian Leader Blueprint. It's a solid model for leadership development to help you establish a better rhythm of life, to see yourself more clearly, to leverage your strengths, and to build more productive relationships. And I want to give you the short guide as my free gift. You can go to ryanfranklin.org and you can download it for free today. And without any further delay, let's get to our session. I'm excited today to have on the podcast a person who I have a deep respect for, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. But let me first introduce her. Her name is Connie Bernard, and I'm going to start by telling you who she is. I would imagine that many of my listeners know her, but I do know that some will not. Connie Bernard is the wife of David Bernard, who is the General Superintendent of the United Pentecostal Church International and the Bishop of New Life Church in Austin, Texas. And she travels extensively with her husband in support of his ministry, but also has her own ministry as she is a frequent speaker throughout the United States and around the world. And together they have an organizational influence with hundreds of thousands of people. And that's no exaggeration. She is the mom of 3 children who are grown and married, and she is Nana to 6 grandchildren. I think I have that right. Yes. And out of respect, I'm going to call her Sister Bernard today, as I always do when I see her. And so, Sister Bernard, welcome to the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast.
Thank you, Ryan, for having me. I feel like it's an honor, and hopefully something I say today can be a help.
Absolutely. I know it will be. Sister Bernard, I'm not sure if I have ever shared this with you, but you are one of my favorite people in the upper ranks of the UPCI. Aww. And I want to tell you why. In October of 2010, I had the privilege of going to Israel, and you were on that trip. Mm-hmm. And I was just a young 30-year-old guy. And I was in awe of those of you in such a high position in our organization. And I just remember you sort of taking the time and slowing down and talking with me throughout that trip, multiple occasions. And that trip, you made me feel like $1 million. And ever since then, as I've seen you maybe once or twice a year, you've always actually called me by name. Mm-hmm. And out of the hundreds of thousands of people that you have influence with, you called me by name, and you ask about my family when I see you. Mm-hmm. And I just want to say that you have an amazing gift of interpersonal sensitivity. And that has made you one of my favorites.
Well,
so thank you so much.
Well, I love you. I love your family. And once you become a friend of mine, you're always a friend. So I think that's one thing that I love is getting to know people and then hanging on to that relationship so that the next time I see them, it's like no time has passed. That's important to me.
Well, you've definitely modeled that. You've shown that over and over again over the last, I guess I've known you for 13 years now. Mm-hmm. So, um, there seems to be an interesting tension for most ministry couples, especially young couples, in balancing their home life and organizational leadership or church ministry. And so, can we start this conversation by you maybe just describing what you think this tension may be? And is that tension okay? Is it okay to have that tension between the home life and ministry life?
First of all, let me just, when you're bringing two people together to form a new family, couples are bringing dynamics from total opposite families. So every couple is going to be different. The dynamics of how you may have someone that's Italian that was raised in a very loud home and boisterous, and then someone coming in that maybe only had a mom and a very quiet home. And the dynamics of what you bring to create this new family makes such a difference in how you move forward. And to me, tension can be a healthy thing. I believe in ministry, it's very important to communicate and be intentional. And Brother Bernard and I have taught many lessons on preventive maintenance. You communicate as how, when you come to this point that it's busy, you talk about it. Okay, we're going into the season. We've got these things lined out. We're going to have to be very intentional in our time together. Some tension I think can be good, because I almost equate ministry tension almost with adrenaline. When it gets so crazy and busy that you don't have the liberty to have those quiet moments that you share with one another. But that tension can be quelled in communication, being intentional in your communication, how you're feeling, opening up to your spouse, knowing, okay, this is coming up. This is going to be a crazy time. When are we going to fit in our family dinner? As a family, when our kids were young, even now, if we're together, we sit at a table and we eat as a family. We did that. I made sure as a mom, we did it several times a week. Well, when you've got something going on, you can't communication. You have to be intentional and watch and see when those tension times come. It's not always going to be that way. If there's an ongoing tension, then there's something much deeper going on. And that's where you need external help. Either talk to a counselor, talk to a peer, a mentor, both of you talk to someone. If there's an ongoing tension, then there's something in the marriage that needs to be resolved. It's not ministry, it's the marriage, because you've come into this together working as a ministry couple. So you both understand you're going to have these times. But I go back to the dynamics of the couple. You've got to be very communicative of what ministry looks like to you. Someone that wasn't raised in ministry, you get into a ministry schedule, it could be very overwhelming. Someone that was raised in it may want to settle down some of that schedule because they've been in, their family was so crazy that they didn't have family time. So communication and being intentional and what your ministry is going to look like is a big part of handling that tension. And yes, I think some tension can be healthy. It's how you communicate through that tension.
Okay. That's good. So you kind of dabbled in this a little bit, but I want to kind of bring it out a little bit more. When a family has an imbalance in this tension, you mentioned that sometimes it even may require outside help from a trusted advisor or a counselor, even.
Right.
But how do you know when you get to that place where, what does that look like when you have an imbalance in tension?
To me, I go back to the word communication. When you stop communicating.
That's very good.
When you start going internally and start handling and you don't communicate the issues. Most couples, the wife tends to be more sensitive to this than the husband, because the husband is the pastor or the minister. So he has a one-track mind. He is on a mission from God. And the wife is the one that has to kind of balance that out, if that makes sense. But when you stop communicating, then it's beyond just, okay, let's sit down and let's catch up with each other. It's been so crazy, we can't catch up. And so when you stop communicating, to me, that is a big red flag and an indicator that you need to communicate, when you're not willing, and you start holding things internal, because all that will do is just it makes it bigger, makes the problem issue greater.
I love the fact that you just said when you stop communicating, because as long as you're
Yes.
communicating, you can communicate through anything.
Even if it's negative communication, you're still working through that.
Exactly.
So.
And in ministry, and I would say, we have leaders that listen to this podcast that may not be directly involved in pastoral leadership, or
yes.
but many of them are involved in organizations or in some form of volunteer ministry or something
Right.
at a church, and so I think it equates regardless. But in pastoral leadership, life can get really crazy for pastors, and I think that that's normal. Like right now, we are our church at the time of this recording is in the middle of our Messiah Easter production, and life is crazy. It's every night, and something going on, and it's a season. We know that it's a short season, and then we'll be on to regular life and back to kind of swing back to
some sense of normal,
a good balance. Yeah.
Yes.
Right now we are in church ministry, probably at the expense of our family.
Yes.
But we will swing back to a normal rhythm when we're done with this.
But even when you're in these tense moments I believe that Messiah is running 4 weekends. So you have an entire
3 weekends.
3 weekends. Okay. So you have almost a month. Of course, I know y'all have been preparing this for months, but even in the times that you're so busy, you can still find 15 minutes to grab your wife, grab your kids, and head to the park. When it's like this, you don't have to take a night off. You don't have just these little sporadic moments that you pull away are jewels. Those are times, even if it's once a week or twice a week, but those sporadic moments are what really put your family back in. Okay. Yes, it's a crazy rhythm, but do something out of the ordinary. Do something just to pull everybody in for 15 minutes or lunch, or when school's out, go grab them and go get ice cream. It's just something.
Doesn't take long either.
No, it doesn't take long, and it doesn't take a lot of money. Go to the park and play tag. I don't care if they're 5, 15, or 25. Do something that's crazy. No, do it, because you're getting yourself out of that tense mode. You're getting yourself out of your normal tension routine, if that makes sense.
Right.
And it's those little things that you can do. Laugh. Share a funny story or anything like that, just to bring your family back into, I don't know. I kind of see it as you see all the mice that get on the wheel and then they all go scurry everywhere, and all of a sudden they all get back on the wheel. It's almost like you're doing this, but then if you find one little time to do something crazy together, it kind of focuses you as a family, and then you go back out and talk about that. It's crazy right now. After Messiah, guys, we're going to take a day and go away somewhere, or, and it's those times that you play catch up to the family. And there's sometimes that family is going to override. You may go on vacation for a week and just leave church behind. Well, you're overloading on family, but you need that too. So when you overload on church, you look ahead and plan and communicate and be intentional. We're going to do this so that everybody knows, okay, our family's okay, crazy right now, but we're going to go do this. Or, hey, my dad said we're going to go, blah, blah, blah. Just something to focus them back on that family's important. It's crazy right now, but we'll catch up. And to me, communication, even in those times, is so important.
That's very good. Yes. So I'm curious. You obviously have 3 kids and had a lot of things going on as you were raising your kids. And I'm going to put you on the spot here on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 or 0 being really unbalanced, 10 being, a reasonable balance of of home life and ministry life. How would you grade your home in the earlier years of your ministry?
I would probably say between a 6 or 7 or 8. That's 6 to 8. Just
And you're
because,
being modest, I'm sure.
well, I will tell you, there were times that I'd put the kids to bed and I'd go somewhere and just cry. And as far as women,
Wow.
we need to take the little teapot off and let the steam, but then we're fine after that. There were times that I would tell Brother Bernard, and we had to learn one another, and I'd say, you know what, I've already solved this, but it was very difficult for me with the kids. But so I just need you to listen in one ear and let it go out the other, because I've already fixed it. Because most of our husbands want to fix things for us. They want to be that knight, that white knight in shining armor, and make everything just great for the wife, for the mom. So a lot of times it was hard, but I go back to, because I am a communicator. I was raised in just a saint's home, but my mom worked for the phone company. She was an executive. That was her job, communicating. Okay. So I was raised in a home that we communicated, and we were very intentional with what we did as far as family. So I was raised in a very strong family home. Brother Bernard watched my family as he was there, here in Austin. And so he kind of knew the dynamic of our family, but I never nag. I don't like nagging. And so, but he would listen. I think sometimes we're a little off. We'd ask our kids, do you think you're spending enough time with your dad? And one might say, yeah, we're great. And the other one might say, no, I need more time. And so we communicated,
So
how
you would
do we
ask
feel?
your kids.
We'd ask our kids. And,
Wow.
our older son, he's a lot like his dad. And he'd say, nah, we're cool. Daniel is more like me, more social, more loves to gravitate to interaction. And he's the middle child, of course, too. So he would say, no, I need more time with dad. Anytime dad was going early and he'd say, anybody want to go with me? Daniel would be the one to go with him, because he wants to spend more time. And then Lindsay was just a girl and had everybody's attention, and she was the church baby. So she, it's like she was along for the ride, the whole thing. So we listened to our children. But then I would also say, I feel like we're a little out of balance. I think we need to do something with our family. And he would listen, because he knew that I was in tune with our kids, and I appreciated and respected what he was doing in ministry. And he respected and appreciated that I was trying to keep the family in that good temperature in the home, if that makes sense. So
It does.
There are many times your family's there's going to be times that you be off balance, but I go back to, you communicate and you be intentional in trying to right those things. Not even if they don't happen now, but you plan ahead to make that right.
I'm looking at all the books behind you, and you told me before we press record that was Brother Bernard's study room, and I can just see him, probably sitting in his easy chair reading a book, or on his computer typing a book, because he's written so many books. I would imagine that was a hard negotiation for him to do what he loved in ministry. I mean, he loved to write, loved to read, loved to study, versus spending time with his family. Did you find that you had to sort of,
Nudge?
I guess, sort of nudge that at
well,
times?
I think we relied on one another where our strengths were. And he knew that I would say, we need to do this. Or family night, Monday night was our family night. Yes, we lived church, but we had devotion in our home, because we raised our kids telling them, you're not a preacher's kid, you're not a pastor's kid, you're a Christian. And these are things that we do, and we're going to have a family devotion away from church, if that makes sense, because you're a family unit first. Of course you love God, but there were times that, I would say, you need to tell the kids, or I'm working on supper and finishing, and I'd say, you need to tell the kids, we're fixing to have devotion. And so he would say, Mom's calling us for devotion. Well, it's him calling, but he's like deferred to me. And I said, no, you're the dad. They want to hear the authority of the spiritual, but they knew who that was. You know what I'm saying? Right. So we worked together on some of this. I will tell you an interesting thing. He was raised on the mission field. So I always kind of say Dr. Seuss, because he had to learn how to sleep on a train, on a plane, on a bus, in a car, in the park, in the church, under the pew, on the pew. But he also had to learn how to focus, because there were times that they were going somewhere and the only place for him to do school was on the train. So he's very focused. So we'll be in the den, even as the children were young, he'd be reading or working on something in his chair, and we're talking about something, or we're planning something, and one of the kids would say, well, what do you think? He didn't even hear it. And so they'd go, Dad, and he'd go, what? And of course he's spot on. He's there. He's got, you've got his attention. But he was so focused because he had to. That's just the way he was raised. And that's the way he worked. Now, with writing books and everything, he always put family first. And most of the book writing, the things that he had to really concentrate, happened anywhere from after the kids went to bed and after, we've had just time to discuss and talk about the day or plans or whatever. Usually 10 or 11 at night until 3 or 4 in the morning. And
Wow.
then he would go to bed, and then he'd be up at 7, or if it was more that 4 or 5, he would 7 or 8, he'd
That's
give himself. He could do that for a day or two, then he'd have to catch up on sleep. But most of the writing he sacrificed his own time and did that when everybody else had gone to bed. And that's usually when he wrote most of the books, anything he focused on. And he could, even in the night, if everybody's doing their own thing or, homework and stuff, he was working. But anytime we said, Dad, honey, whatever, he's right there. So I appreciate that, he put family first too.
Yeah, I was kind of laughing at that a little bit, because that sounds a lot like me and my wife with the kids. They have to get my attention if my head is in a book or
so you understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as you matured as a mom and as a pastor's wife, at one point you were probably learning how
Yes.
to manage this tension and to have balance. Besides the communication thing, because that's obviously something that you're very gifted at naturally, but you also worked hard to make sure that happened, even though you're gifted at it. But besides the communication thing, what did you learn about keeping the balance with the tension of home and ministry as you sort of grew up with your kids?
Well, over time, and the older your kids get, they get more involved in activities. So you have to be more aggressive in keeping a stricter schedule, finding out who needs to be where, when. And one thing I think I learned to appreciate the word fluid, because you have to be fluid with your schedule, and you have to be willing to be flexible. You may have your set schedule for the whole day, and you get a call that Sister So-and-so passed away. So you have to throw everything out the window. So you have to be willing to allow the balance to get off. You have to it's not the end of the world. You have to learn that go ahead.
I was just going to ask, is that easy for you? Are you more structured or less structured
No,
person?
I'm probably less structured, just because I was raised in a home that my parents worked full-time jobs. Our evenings were free, other than church night or youth events or something. So we had more time. We didn't have to be structured. He was raised in a very ultra-structured time, because Sundays in Korea on the mission field, they may be at 4 churches. They may be at 5 services. Wow. And so getting from one place to the other, you had to catch the bus. And if you missed a certain time, you would miss the subway and, to school. And so, again, we're gelling 2 families totally different. I'm more of a sporadic, let's drop everything and go do this. Of course, over time with the church, I had to learn to be, I appreciate structure and I appreciate routine. Your children have to have routine when they're young. Even in teenage years, they know these are set things. They can balance everything around what you have set as a structure. And that helps even their balance. You're teaching them balance. But I had to learn, and I appreciated structure more. But it took me a while when we got married to figure out I didn't want to have to schedule every moment. Why do you have to schedule? But now you have to, you have to. And even on dates, we schedule those and we put those in the calendar so that there's nothing else that can affect those. We have an event. Sorry, we already have an event. They don't have to know that we're going on a date. Those dates are just as important as church events.
But if they do know, or if they do find out, then it's so be it. It's something that's important.
So be it. My husband and wife are important. If our family fails, then your family's going to fail too, because we're not good examples for you. So
exactly.
It's a learning curve, but your people want to learn, they want to know the right way to do it. Not that we always have gotten it right.
I'm hearing you say that you sort of, as you matured, you actually moved towards more structure.
Had to, yes.
Yeah.
You have to, and you have to.
And Brother Bernard had to move to less structured.
Yes, in some ways. And, again, we had to find that happy medium between the two dynamics of how we were raised. And, I could go off on a whole subject like that, but it is keeping that balance. The busier you get, the more you have to have routine, organization, and structure, or you're on a runaway train and you will crash.
Absolutely. So I think we've already answered this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just in case there's something more to add to this. But I'm sure that you, as a pastor's wife in particular, have witnessed time and time again kids falling victim to a dad who is driven by productivity. You probably see it maybe even more now than you did as a pastor's wife. But so, and it could be even good or godly productivity. But kids falling victim to that in a home. And obviously, Brother Bernard, he was and still is he's a very driven person. So I'm sure that you've had to negotiate through that, or he has had to negotiate through that and make sure that he keeps a focus on that. But how do you both manage to keep your kids as a priority over leadership or church work?
Again, it's intentional.
Yeah.
You have to, and honestly, Ryan, you're teaching your family, you're teaching your church people, when you set those boundaries, that family is important. You're teaching them that they need to do the same thing in their home. Again, I'm very thankful if I noticed that we were not spending enough time together as a family, even just on a daily, regular routine, take away the busy moments or seasons. We'd sit down and we'd talk about it. And I say, I really feel like our kids are suffering right now, or they feel like they're not neglected, but they're just not getting enough of our time. And so we would plan events just to rein in. But when you set in your structure family time, like Monday devotion, we did that as a church. No one could schedule any church events on Monday night. That was strictly for family. Family is now, if you want to get together with another family and go play ball or go to the picnic, that's fine, whatever you want to do. Yeah. But we structured those times. But we also told our people, if we had an extracurricular thing going on at the church, maybe it was a choir practice, and one of our kids had a concert, their seasonal concert or something. I always told the people, I'm not going to be there at choir practice. Lindsay has a concert and I'm going to be there. And they knew that because we had established that our family was our priority, and our kids knew that. We had something, and actually Daniel has shared this at the PK at BOTT with the PKs. He told the whole story about how that there's a time in his life in high school that he was being pulled by someone, and it was a very, we could see, and someone actually called us and said, we had kind of sensed something. He came off of a band trip that they'd had an out-of-town competition, and we both felt in our spirit we need to take him away and spend time alone with him. We were scheduled to go overseas on a missions trip. Yes, it cost us several $1,000s, but at that time they didn't refund. We canceled that trip, set someone else to take care of church, and just us and Daniel went away for the weekend. We got a hotel out of town and just spent time with him. And he said that was a pivotal moment in my life that I realized that my parents valued me more than church. And I tell people all the time, your family, that's who you're responsible to take to heaven with you. Nobody else is going to be responsible for them. I'm sorry, I'm getting your family is much more important than your church people, and they have to know that, and they do know that. And I mean, we communicated. Do you feel like we're spending time? Do you need more as a family? Do you feel like we're strong? Do you feel like we're spending too much time away from one another? And they would always tell us yes or no. And we didn't say that all the time. We didn't nag. And if I can just interject that we never raised our voices at our kids. We talk calmly. Our kids are not, you should never scream or yell at your spouse or your children. You're teaching them that that's a okay way to communicate, which it's not. Someone out in the world will call them out on that. But, we had a dynamic in our family that we could talk, and our children knew at a very young age, no matter what happened, that they could talk to us. And we wouldn't shame them. We wouldn't judge them. If they can't come to their parents, then they're going to find someone else to talk to. So
true. That is so true. So you obviously, and I've asked you to come on and talk about this subject because you've obviously done it well. But for the mother or father out there, and I've got a wide range of listeners in the podcast. Some, are in their, 40s, 50s, 60s. Maybe they've already raised their kids.
Yes.
And they may be feeling a little bit guilty because they spent years, engrossed in ministry and sort of disconnected from their family.
Yes.
And they may be listening to this thinking, oh, I wish I could get those years back. And they're feeling that guilt. What advice would you give for them today? Well,
and I just shared this with a state minister's wives retreat, and I told them that there's a lot that probably maybe their children aren't serving God right now. Maybe to me it is a generational thing, Ryan. Years ago, I was raised up in that you put your all into church. Well, whatever you got going out there, it'll go after church situations and after church. Well, that has all shifted now. And I told them, I said, you can't gain those years. But again, you go back to communicating. What is wrong with you sitting down with that, even if they're sitting next to you on the pew every Sunday, or they're right now they're not serving the Lord or whatever. There's not a good connection. There's nothing that says you cannot back up and say, can we go have lunch? And just say, I'm sorry that I did not give you more importance when you were younger. I'd love to get closer now. I'd love to find opportunities for us to have lunch every other week. I know your schedule's busy. I'm the one that's not as busy now, but if you can, communication, saying you're sorry. I mean, I did that when my kids were little. Something would happen and I'd say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, because we respect them. And I think that's what happened in this generation years ago, that there wasn't anyone out there saying, this is what you need to do. And so now I think because we're such a vocal society and communication and all of this, that you hear it more now, that this is okay. This is what needs to happen. Your family is important, and giving permission. But those that feel like they've lost years, there's nothing that says you can't communicate that and say, I'm sorry that I didn't spend time. I realize now, maybe the times that we wasted, that we should have spent more time together. Is there a way we can make up some of those? And just to communicate that, sometimes that's all someone needs to hear, to know that you realize the time that was lost. Does that make sense? And that
is so good. Yes.
Just to communicate that. And some people, I understand some people have a hard time saying, I'm sorry. There's a lot of ways you can say, I'm sorry. I regret that I did not put more importance on our family, or I wish we could have. How can I make this up now? So I think there's ways.
And even internally and personally, even grieving some of that loss. Maybe,
Yes.
sometimes it even takes a counselor, but just processing through the grief of that loss. And it truly is, for some, maybe a loss in their life.
It is a loss. And I actually said this too. You can't hold that forever. And I think it's because I think if we would have been more communicative back then, or I think it is a generational thing. Just in that era, you gave your all to God, bless God. Well, God doesn't want us to kill ourselves for Him. He doesn't.
Right,
He doesn't
right.
expect us to work. So, and I think gaining some of that balance through communication and training and teaching and just being aware of it has really changed how we live our lives and work with our families.
Right.
But that guilt, they can't hold that. And that's where you go to God and say, God, you're going to have to help me with this. And then find a way to communicate, find a way to bridge that gap, you can make up time, you can't get back those, but there's nothing moving forward that says that you can't be intentional in finding more opportunities to spend more time. Even if it's talking on the phone if you're in Washington and Florida, then set up a FaceTime. Thank the Lord for FaceTime. But find a time to talk face to face, see each other. There's something about communicating and seeing their face, seeing the emotion, seeing the expression that you can't replace that.
Yeah. In person, I've heard it said that in person is like eating a steak, but over Zoom or FaceTime, that's like eating a hamburger. They're both nourishing. One is better than the other, but they're both nourishing.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Something about seeing a face that makes a huge difference. It's personal.
Makes it more personal. Yeah.
So you've given us a lot of advice and a lot of, I would say, general for men and women, but I want to zero in on the lady listener out there. What specific advice would you give to the female of the home for maintaining that balance and temperature of the home?
Just stop it. Slow down. Women tend to compare themselves and their life and their home, the dynamics of their home, to other women, and that is the worst thing you can do. And that's kind of one of my candy sticks that I say, just stop it. And I'll tell them, look at your sister, look at her and say, stop it. And we love doing that. We love telling other people what to do. But just slow down. Give yourself room to express your emotions on your own. And I tell them, women, we're like teapots. And sometimes we have to let off steam. Sometimes we have to let that go, whether it's finding a quiet place to cry, finding a quiet place just to talk to yourself. You can do it in your car now because everybody thinks you're on Bluetooth. So, but you need to find avenues and ways to just express yourself, because we do like to communicate. And and then also in finding that balance, you need to give yourself a break. We're too hard on ourselves. We expect that everybody thinks we have to be perfect and this perfect. I'll never forget, we were here in Austin, and one of our secretaries at the church needed to bring something by the house. And, and I don't know, just maybe the dynamic of the city or what, but we didn't have people stop by our house all the time. Nobody just popped in on our house. But I think it's because we were always accessible. It's not like they couldn't get a hold of us. We always, again, we're big communicators. They knew when we were available. We took time at church to sit and talk with people and that type of thing. But she came by our house, and when we first built the church and we were renting, or even after we were in this house, we would still have we'd have prayer once a month with our care group areas and sections of the town, because we wanted them in our home. So, but one day she came by, and I was folding clothes on the couch. And so she came in and was dropping something off for me. And she just smiled, and I said, what are you smiling at? And she said, you're normal. You fold clothes. Well, I said, of course I do, but it's just for her to realize that I'm not just perfect. I said, no, absolutely not. And I'd be the first person to be the real one of saying, oh, I messed up yesterday. And, but it's just, they put us on this we feel like the pressure of being this certain expectation in ministers' wives. And I tell them there is no book. I mean, you can read 20 books on being a minister's wife, but there is no book that tells you how to be, because where you are, the dynamics of your church, the dynamics of your marriage, your children, where you are in life, all of that makes up who you are and what you're doing now. 2 years from now, might be doing something totally different. Your ministry may change. Your children are growing. You're ever changing, but you've got to be fluid with that and flexible and be okay with that. And so mainly just to calm down and enjoy life. Don't get so stressed about it that you can't even enjoy the moment that you're in. And comparing, it's horrible. We're always comparing ourselves, and there's no way you can compare yourself to anybody, because you're not her.
I hear an integration in your conversation there. I hear an integration of the good and the bad. And, people often ask me, in casual conversation, well, how are you, Ryan? And I'll say, well, mostly good. And, most people will say, well, I'm good, or everything's good, or
yeah.
And the reality is everything is never going to be good.
Well, right now, people ask me how I am. I'm not real sure. Let me check on that and see where I am or how I am.
But there's a few challenging things in life, but it's mostly good.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is true. And I've told people before, even high stress, good things can cause attention. The busyness can all be good things, but that still affects you the same way as the bad, because you're in this mode. You're in a high adrenaline mode all the time when it's super busy. So we have to teach ourselves that it's okay. It's, life's good. Yeah, you're going to get knocked off the chair a period of time, but that's life. Thank the Lord that we live for a God that helps us and answers our prayers. But, so many people don't even have that to lean on, and they're still dealing with life. So,
yeah.
So
extending, staying with the moms just for a moment. I've heard you mention that moms set the temperature of the home. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes. A lot of times, if you look at it closely, the husband, the minister, is, again, mission-minded, because men are driven to their profession. That's that's what they're driven to provide for the home and all of that. So the men set the temperature for the church, for the community involvement. The church involvement, community involvement is driven by the leaders. If you're in a ministry, if you're over a ministry, that ministry is going to have your character. If you're high energy, that ministry is going to be high energy. But the woman sets the temperature in the home, the attitude, the perspective, the peace in the home. You've heard the phrase, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So that, that kind of gives that same mentality of like, if you're upset, everything you do in the home, you're going to be in chaos, and your children are going to feel that. Your husband's going to sense it and know it by how loud you're banging the cabinets. It's like the temperature in the home is going to come from the wife, the mom, because you're setting the atmosphere, the attitude, the perspective about church, the perspective about the dad. There are many times when we were building this church, Brother Bernard had written several books. He'd be teaching and go to a conference from Thursday through Saturday. Everybody knew where he was. He was accessible. But then we were at home. So times it would get maybe stressful. I have to tell him, look, Dad's gone right now, but isn't it a blessing that God is allowing him to talk to people that do not know anything about God? He's able to share the Word of God with people that don't know God. Isn't that amazing? Or I could have said, I know Dad's gone again. He'll be back, but it's 2 more days. He's not going to be back till. We'll see the difference. I'm setting a perspective in their mentality and their respect for their dad, whether he's gone again, we're on our own, or it's amazing that God is using him. Yeah, we miss him, but he'll be back. And when he gets back, we're going to have ice cream we're going to go get some ice cream when Dad gets back. Or while Dad's gone, guess what we're having for dinner? We're having pancakes and sausage. It's like you set the tone of the home in any situation. And that's what I mean by the temperature. It's the wife the emotions, the mental, the level of peace, the level of chaos is set by the mom
true.
in the home. And
That is so true.
everybody senses that. And a lot of you can
Yeah.
say, someone comes in my home, they say, "Oh wow, I feel such peace here." Well,
Yeah.
if there's not peace, they're not going to say, "Oh, I feel chaos in here," So it makes
Yeah.
a difference. It really does.
It makes a huge difference. Angie definitely sets the temperature of our home.
Yeah.
So you have the ear of a ton of men who are listening right now. And so what would you say is most important for the male figure? What would you like them to know about the home?
To be present, just to be present. It's so important to be at the moment, and to listen to the life of their children, not listen to what they're saying, but listen to their living. Does that make sense? Observe and watch how they're living, and whether that's, because parents, sometimes husbands may not be sensitive to that just because, again, they're on a mission. So when you're home, be home. And that's very difficult for husbands because, again, they come home, but their mind never stops with the things that are going on, or things that they're having to deal with, or things that are being planned that they're responsible for. And that's very, very weighty. But again, if the wife sets the temperature when your children are young, set a timer on the oven. My kids always, when my husband would come home and they were like young, I'd set a timer on the oven, and I told him, I said, "I know you're tired, just lay out in the middle of the floor." And he would get out in the middle of the floor, and I said, "Okay, kids, you've got him for 5 minutes, go." And they would just wrestle over him. He would grab them by the arm. When that timer went off, I would tell them, "Okay, Dad's tired, he's worked so we can have the house that we live in. He's worked so that we can have what we have. Now he needs a break. Now y'all go play or go whatever and give Dad a break." But they had his time. So men, be present. If your wife says your kids need you, listen to your wife. If she's nagging, I give you permission to not listen to her, because that just doesn't help anything. Communication. Communicate with your wife. And the last thing I think a lot of men want to do when they would come home is talk, because they have talked all day, they've counseled all day. And I think, again, that's a balance. I think the wives need to do better about giving them time and space. But then the men, when it's that time to be present in the home, might only need to be 30 minutes. And sometimes it's overwhelming to think, I'm coming home, I've got to be present, I'm family, I'm tired, I don't want to deal with the kids. Just give them 30 minutes. That's all they need. And then you can do whatever.
I love the way that you have repeatedly said and communicated that it doesn't require a lot of time.
Oh, no.
And I have a personal goal. Each day I want to have individual focused conversations with each one of my kids. Now I only have 2 kids, but I want to have individual conversations.
That's great. That's amazing.
And I find that we actually have a lot more than just one, because I am focused on that one. But I remember in earlier years of my life, not really, maybe taking care of their needs in some form or fashion, but not really sitting down and having individual conversations where I look them in the eye and I kind of tune in to the emotion that's within them. And I really feel like that's super important, and it does not take long. I mean,
no, and a
5 minutes, 10 minutes
at the max. And even when our kids were young, they'd come home from Sunday school. "Mom, John said his mom and dad were getting a divorce. What does that mean?" I don't need to go into everything. They don't need the big picture. But I would also not say, "Oh, you don't need to listen to that. You don't need to worry about that. You don't need to know about that." I would say, "You know what? Their mommy and daddy may be having trouble right now, but you know what we can do? We can pray." And I said, "Let's pray right now. Do you want to pray?" They would pray. And I just gave them ownership of that situation. Yet they didn't need to know more than what they had, but yet I didn't cast them aside. I respected and honored that they had feelings for that, and I let them talk about it. And from the day one, we told them, you can come to us for anything. And, if you've got a kid that comes and said, oh, well, at high school, how I get a ride home with so-and-so. Well, they stopped by and they all just started smoking weed. I didn't. Well, the first thing you can go and say, oh, you didn't smoke any, did you? Or, oh my word, why did you can say, oh, I hate it, because you need to trust that your kid wants to do right and wants to do good. And so how you respond, even in those little communications, they will learn just to shut off. Oh my goodness, they think I did that. Well, why would I even want to talk to them about anything? So it's that communication again on a daily basis.
You said something just a second ago that I want to zero in on. You said that you allow them to feel I don't know exactly how you said it, feel their feelings, their emotions, express their emotions.
Yes.
That is so vital. Can you talk about that just a second?
You mean like when they want to talk about something? Yes, because
the importance of that.
Because their emotions are going to change, their situations are going to change, and with our society and our life, things happen to them. If they can't have that freedom to tell you and actually tell you how they feel without you saying, "Oh, well, that's because as a parent, we want to protect our kids, but when we hear that they're in a situation, we immediately get scared for them. We don't want to lose them. So, and our tendency is to be afraid of that direction. So therefore we want to shut them off. Right. Some things they need to learn how to go through on their own and talk through it with you for them to stand on their own 2 feet and say, that's
even if it's anger or it's frustration or
yes.
I think it's so important, as a pastoral counselor, I see so many that do not know how to express their emotions. And a lot of times it roots from childhood of not being able to, not having that opportunity.
But a lot of parents shut that down because a lot of parents don't know how to deal with it. You don't have to be a major counselor but we also taught our children how to communicate without yelling, without screaming, and without it's okay to be angry. Jonathan, our oldest, had he had a lot of anger as a child, and we're both very calm people. We think, where's this coming from? Well, it's coming from Adam, And when he got the Holy Ghost, God delivered all of that anger for him. It was good, and we didn't, but we had to learn how to communicate with him totally different than we communicated with Daniel or Lindsay. And we, Brother Bernard would say, you know what? I know you're upset and I know you're mad. We can't really talk about this right now because you're not really listening. You're just angry. So why don't you go to your room? Don't throw anything. Don't hurt anything. You need to do something, then scream at your pillow, punch your pillow. But when you're ready to talk about it and you feel like you can talk about it, of course, we did the whole holding them. Come on, take deep breaths, settle down. But if it was to that point, he was like 7 or 8 or 9. We'd tell him, just go to your room, close the door, and when you're ready to join society, then come back down and we'll talk about it. So you have to learn how to help them with their emotions. You can't just shut them off. You have to process, because that's how they learn to handle their emotions and how to handle and communicate in a respectful and mannerly way and not disrespect people along the way, but yet be able to express things. And so you have to monitor those expressions and that communication as they grow, but to actually listen to them and let them express those emotions, whether it's anger or hurt. Why are you hurt? Tell me why you're hurt. No, I would have been hurt too. That's very valid. That's a very good point. Let's see first of all, let's pray that God will help us. And so all of those are teaching moments, but you have to you've got to let them be able to express those emotions. And
I think if people don't get anything else, if they could get that concept, if they don't get anything else from this podcast, that is the concept that needs to be really fleshed out in any home. It's such a powerful thing. So,
well, if your kids know it's a safe place, emotionally and mentally, that their home is a safe place that they can communicate.
Right. So. And express those emotions.
Yes.
So I've got one more ending question that I end with everyone. But before I do that, I just want to ask you, is there anything else regarding balance of tension of the home and organizational leadership? Anything
I don't
there
think
that you would
so,
want to say?
and you've said the word. The biggest word in all of this is balance, and you have to be intentional in that balance also. But I think if you communicate, you keep the right perspective and attitude and respect, then the balance will happen. But you've got to be intentional with it.
And balance is not in the week. Balance is sort of a feeling, I would think, over the course of time. Would you agree?
Yes, and it's like you find your stride, you find your balance, and the principles that you create in your home will adjust along with that balance. The principles are set, the foundation is set. Things are going to come and go, but if you've communicated when those times come, we're going to ride it together. We're going to ride that wave, and it will settle down, and then we'll find that balance again. But if you had this all the time, life would be boring. You wouldn't be able you wouldn't be able to learn how to handle situations if you didn't have the fight for balance. So.
All right. So my last question for you, what's one thing that you wish you could tell your younger self? It could be related to this topic, could be related to something else. It's something I ask all of the people that I interview, but what's one thing that you wish you could tell your younger self?
I wish I would tell my younger self to give myself a break, because we're too hard on ourselves. We push ourselves too hard, and the person that criticizes us the most are ourselves, and that's not the will of God. So I would tell my younger self just to stop it and just give myself a break.
I love it.
It's when you take those breaks that you realize that you can be more in the moment, and you're not worried about what you're pursuing or what you're trying to be, but you're living in the moment and be happy in that moment. So.
Yes. Yeah. Any other final words?
No. Just stop it.
All right. Stop it.
Stop it.
Well, Sister Bernard, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I want to thank you so much for giving me and our listeners your time today. I know you're a very, very busy person, and I believe this is going to help so many people, particularly ministers and spouses.
Well, thank you.
Conversation.
I've enjoyed, you can tell it's a passion of mine, but I also want to commend you and thank you. This is not something that you have just been working on overnight. You have been working on leadership for more than 13 years, 15 years. I know even 13 years ago, you were working on leadership training, and I commend you for that. It's very, very needed, and I thank you for spending the time and having the passion for helping other people with leadership. It's a blessing.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Sister Bernard. Well, I just want to say that whoever may be watching or listening today, if you're new to the show, be sure to hit subscribe wherever you listen to audio podcast or on YouTube. And also, it would just make my day if you would take a short minute to rate the show and write a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen. My name is Ryan Franklin. Thank you so much for joining us on the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast.